If Richard Dawkins witnessed the second coming of Christ, this is what he would say.
Even if there was this booming voice and the second coming in clouds of glory, the more probable explanation is that it's a hallucination or
And that's not all. We are about to see how these atheists answer a question regarding what evidence could persuade them of the existence of God. This video aims to expose the hypocrisy and intellectual dishonesty of some atheists. Please consider subscribing for more videos like this. The first on the list is a chemist named Peter Atkins. Take a look.
Even if I died and was confronted with St. Peter saying, "Welcome to heaven," I'd probably think I was dreaming.
Would you? Well, that leads me on to my next question. Do you want God to exist in any shape or form? Would you be pleasantly surprised if you woke up on the other side of death
and found a life of eternal bliss? Heaven is found to be so boring that they ask to go down to hell for a bit of fun.
It sounds like, Peter, that there's no evidence that will persuade you away from atheism.
Well, to be honest, I think that's probably the case.
As an agnostic, I will share my thoughts later. For now, let's listen to Richard Dawkins' response.
What would it take for you to believe in God?
Well, I used to say it would be very simple. It would be, the second coming of Jesus or a great big, deep, booming bass Paul Robeson voice saying, "I am God and I created." But even if there was this booming voice and the second coming in clouds of glory, the more probable explanation is that it's a hallucination or a conjuring trick by David Copperfield or something. He made the point that a supernatural explanation for anything is incoherent, that it just doesn't it doesn't add up to an explanation for anything.
So what would persuade you?
Well, I'm starting to think nothing would.
In case you think you've seen it all, you haven't. The third individual on the list is a philosopher named Keith Parsons. And before we hear his take on what would convince him of God's existence, listen to his perspective on the popular evidence supporting the resurrection of Jesus Christ, namely, the eyewitness accounts of the disciples. Then you will hear how Dr. Craig delivers a mic drop response that nearly left the atheist speechless.
What causes hallucination? Well, the Encyclopedia of Psychology that I was reading says extreme depression, an extreme experience of loss, of alienation. Surely the disciples, after the death of their leader, as Dr. Craig said, would have been experiencing precisely those severe psychological symptoms that would induce such hallucinations.
Wow. So he argues that the disciples' reports of the risen Christ were due to hallucinations, a view similar to that of Dawkins and Peter Atkins, who believe psychological disorders are the only sensible explanation for supernatural experiences. However, watch this brief conversation between him and William Craig in the final moments of the debate, and observe how William Craig uses Keith Parsons' earlier arguments to trap him.
You didn't give any sort of evidence that would satisfy you with respect to one of these extraordinary claims. It made it sound like, to me, you were saying that nothing would convince you, no matter what.
No, all sorts of things would convince me.
Well, with respect to the resurrection, though, I mean, you said if there was a video camera, you'd say it was a fake stone that was rolled away. What sort of...
That would be the more reasonable hypothesis under the circumstances.
Well, but see, that's what I fear. It is. It's just an a priori rejection of the miraculous here. You're not. There isn't any kind of literary testimony, historical testimony that could convince you.
Once again, it's common sense. Let me appeal to court cases, okay? In court, on what basis do we believe certain testimony, okay? Well, we believe testimony often on the basis of how likely or unlikely we think it is that somebody is telling the truth, on the basis of all sorts of surrounding circumstances. Now, in court case, generally speaking, there are no claims to supernatural action. There are no claims to anything occurring which was physically impossible or against the laws of nature, however one wants to phrase it, that sort of thing. Yet we still judge guilt or innocence, send people to the to execution or not, on the basis of what we consider to be likely or unlikely on the given circumstances, that sort of thing. So once again, these extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. In no way implies a bias against the supernatural. It's simply an application of a rule which we use in our daily lives.
But you're saying that when you say extraordinary, really what you're saying is no amount of evidence would convince me of these extraordinary claims.
Sure it would. If tomorrow morning, immediately after breakfast, suddenly there was an earthquake, and a silvery light shone in the sky, and the leaves dropped from the trees, and I dashed outside, and there, towering over us like 100 Everests, was this giant figure with lightning playing around his Michelangeloid face, and he pointed down and saying, "Be assured, Keith M. Parsons, that I do in fact exist, and I'm sick of your logic chopping." Dr. Craig, I would join you in the pew of the church, in the front pew of the church the next Sunday.
You don't think that you would have said, "Boy, I was having a hallucination"?
I think he caught himself in his own web. So tell me, is it possible for more than 10 disciples, including Apostle Paul, who was initially an adversary of Christ, to have similar hallucinations of the same risen Christ? It might be conceivable for one individual, but for 10 people who risked and ultimately lost their lives for someone they allegedly hallucinated about, that defies logic in every sense. Please share your thoughts on those claims made by atheists in the comments, and also check out this other video of Richard Dawkins' view on the death and sacrifice of Jesus Christ. See you later.